for September 9th to order. We have the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was in June 1st, 2009. Welcome to a new fiscal year, folks. Is Corey Provost here yet? No. I'll introduce Corey. Yes, sir. Thank you. Are these different than what was mailed? These the same?
More, yeah, the mail and more.
I ask for approval for the minutes. I'll move it. Do I have a second? Any comments? Any changes? All in favor? Say aye. Any opposed? So moved. So we have 5 resolutions. I'll go through them quickly. We'll vote on them separately and discuss them separately. The resolution, action item B is a resolution to authorize the General Counsel to execute a contract on behalf of LaGuardia Community College to purchase maintenance services. The contract shall be awarded to the lowest responsible bidder after public advertisement and sealed bid by the college pursuant to law and university regulations. Such purchase shall not exceed a total estimated cost of $3,150,000 for the initial one-year term. The contract shall also include up to 4 one-year options for the university to review in its best interest. The college will use the services to provide maintenance for buildings, grounds, and other related systems. Do I have a second?
So moved.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, commentary? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Item C is a resolution to authorize the General Counsel to execute a contract on behalf of LaGuardia Community College to purchase janitorial services. The contract shall be awarded to the New York State Industries of the Disabled without competitive bidding and pursuant to law and university regulations. Such purchase shall not exceed a total estimated cost of $2,330,000 during the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2010. The contract shall also include up to 4 one-year options for renewal. The college is making this procurement through the New York State Finance Law, Section 162. New York State Industries for the Disabled is a listed preferred source. Do I have a second?
So moved.
Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Unopposed? Okay. The next resolution is to authorize the General Counsel to execute a memorandum of understanding on behalf of the City University of New York and the State University of New York, NY Link and NY Link. The MOU shall be awarded as an intergovernmental agreement pursuant to university regulations and applicable to law for a term of 1 year. The total amount of services shall not exceed $1,850,000 for this term. The memorandum of understanding formalizes and extends City University's ongoing relations with NY Link to receive critical services for the 20 CUNY college libraries as well as CUNY Central Office. Do I have a second?
So moved.
Any questions, comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item E, a resolution authorized the Board of Trustees to approve the City University Identity Theft Prevention Program. This new program provides for policies and procedures to help reduce the risk of theft of identities of students and other members of the university community. The program is based on the Federal Trade Commission's regulation known as the Red Flag Rule. Such rule requires certain creditors to develop and implement an identity theft prevention program for accounts that is designed to permit multiple payments or transactions. Among the university accounts covered by the rules are Perkins loan accounts, tuition payment plan accounts, and accounts established for the repayment of loans to students. The program was developed by a task force representing the departments within the university that are responsible for opening and or maintaining these covered accounts. Do I have a second? Second. Any questions or comments before we move into a vote? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now to the good stuff. Vanessa, what happened this summer? How's the budgets?
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. Let me first begin by laying the groundwork for where we ended the last fiscal year, where the state legislature and the governor ended with respect to the adopted budgets, and where we began this fiscal year, 2010, in terms of the resource allocation and the process that we'll be starting today. We've already begun about crafting our budget request for 2011. So let me take you back a little bit to May in the state legislature. The governor and the legislature had agreed to an adopted budget that provided the university with an investment opportunity. You'll recall that the governor had changed tuition policy in the state of New York that allowed the university, in the midst of raising tuition, to deal with the budget challenges, to retain some of that tuition in order to engage in an investment program. There were some challenges in the executive budget that were addressed by the legislature. There were some planned reductions that were suggested, all of which were restored by the legislature. So we started the fiscal year with an adopted budget that had an investment component. But as I think you may recall, the last time I met with you, we've been there before, where we start with an adopted budget. And the question was whether or not the budget that was enacted by the legislature and agreed to by the governor was a budget that would sustain itself and that would hold itself throughout the summer, or whether or not the deteriorating economic conditions that the state was facing was going to put even more budget pressure on the state of New York. And of course, we didn't know what we didn't know at the time, that the economy would begin to come out of its very difficult moment, and there are sort of trend lines that would suggest that there's a level of stability. That's number one. Two, the impact of the federal stimulus package continues to make it a stable budget environment for 2010. So we were able, as a consequence, to be able to allocate resources to the campuses to hire some additional full-time faculty, not at the rate that we would have liked to, but nonetheless a modest investment program. And to, if you recall, the commitment of this board to set aside $10 million to finance a student financial aid program to help students meet the challenges of the tuition increase, to have a textbook initiative, to have some employment opportunities. And we were very pleased that we were able to do that and are doing that. And so we begin the fiscal year in pretty good shape in that respect. However, and the governor has already indicated last month that there is some budget pressure in the current year, and they're now forecasting a $2.1 billion shortfall for the state of New York for the current fiscal year. And the governor has indicated that he will be presenting or inviting the legislature at the end of this month to come and craft a plan to deal with the $2.1 billion shortfall in the current year, and a budget shortfall that's now projected to be $4.6 billion in fiscal 2011. And so this week you may be hearing and reading in the papers about proposals that may be emanating from the executive of potential mid-year reductions. But as we did last year, the chancellor always instructs us to manage our resources prudently, and we have advised the campuses that it wouldn't be too surprising if there was some budget pressure. And so colleges have set aside appropriate reserves to deal with any potential real budget challenge. So we're confident that whatever it is that may come in the form of some mid-year budget pressure, that the system is already geared up and prepared to manage it and maintain the core principles of the university, that the instructional components and the direct student services are maintained. We were able to honor that commitment last year under arguably a much more difficult budget scenario, and I'm confident that we'll be able to do that again this year. So we'll be able to report, perhaps, Chancellor, by the time we have the full board meeting, we'll know a little bit more about what the legislature will be considering in the form of any mid-year budget reductions. But at this point, it's only some conversations that are taking place that we don't really have anything specific. But, it's fair to say we're in a fairly optimistic mood because of the work of the stimulus package and the very innovative policy of the governor in allowing us to retain some of the tuition revenue for investment purposes. So that's where we are with the state. The city of New York, we did not, if you recall, sustain any budget reductions last year from the city of New York. The city council and the mayor were able to reach an accommodation on planned reductions. But nevertheless, the city of New York is facing some considerable budget gaps. In fact, they may even be facing even tighter budget pressure than the state of New York, given that the stimulus package was largely a state funded stimulus package. And number two, the city of New York used a lot of its reserves and surpluses to fund the budget for 2010. So going forward, they're looking at some budget pressure that we may, find ourselves having to confront with. But at this point, the budget is fairly stable. The city council and mayor enacted a budget that provided some opportunities for us to maintain our services. This board approved a tuition increase that will allow the system to not only maintain those services, but also to engage in a modest investment program at the community colleges. And we're doing for the community colleges what we're doing for the senior colleges. So on the allocation front, things are also in pretty good shape. And I should incidentally say that, and the chancellor may want to report on the enrollment that we received, the gains that we have seen in the current year. Our enrollment is projected to rise by about 8% in the full-time equivalent students. At community colleges, there's an average of a nearly 12% increase in enrollment. That's a considerable amount of new students, and that will also enable the system to offset any particular budget pressure. I mean, one of the reasons we were able to, in the very, very difficult year last year, be able to maintain the current levels of services is because we also had a decent enrollment gain last year, and the additional revenue from that enrollment gain allowed the system to offset some of the cuts that the state had imposed. And I foresee something similar. We have the challenge of having to meet the services of all that increased enrollment, and we have to hire the additional, faculty and support staff. But it does enable, at least in the year in which you generate the revenue, to be able to sustain and offset any potential budget reductions. So the picture is one of fair stability, but also one that we need to be mindful as we think beyond 2010 and start thinking about 2011 and 2012, where the stimulus package that is holding the state budget together is gone or likely not to come back, although there is some speculation that there may be some other investments, but we clearly cannot plan on that. And as a consequence, the chancellor, as you know, last year established budget working groups that we are all engaged in trying to make sure that we identify the revenues going forward, that we plan carefully for what could be difficult times in fiscal 2012, and we don't want to start thinking about the budget challenges in fiscal 2012 and fiscal 2012. So we are planning and working to make sure that we meet those obligations. At the same time, we have to put together a budget request over the next few weeks and months. The governor will be releasing an executive budget in January of 2010, which for all practical purposes means that they have a budget developed by October to November. This board will be asked to consider a budget request in the November meeting. What I hope to be able to do at the November Committee on Fiscal Affairs and in advance of the Committee on Fiscal Affairs is to send all of you a draft budget proposal. One of the things that we're doing now is engaging in system-wide consultations with presidents, students, and faculty members on exactly what that should look like. We're examining what elements of the compact we need to move forward with. The compact will be the vehicle that we are going to be using again to help finance the system. That is a system that seeks to get all the stakeholders involved, the City of New York, the State of New York, the students, philanthropists, and friends of the university, and the system itself in terms of reshaping its budget. It is one that has been successful, and I'm not going to quarrel with success. We're going to continue doing that. But there may be modifications in terms of our tuition policy, in terms of our efforts with philanthropy. After all, many of the friends and funds that have contributed to CUNY, you'll hear from our investment consultant later on, are underwater. And so it's hard, and it may be a little bit more challenging to engage. At the same time, it's also perhaps a reminder to the private sector that it's even more important that they contribute to the university, given the challenges that we're likely to face in 2012 and 2013. The areas of investment that we'll be looking to seek your support on will, I think, in the first, second, and third instance, be our top priority, which is, full-time faculty at this university. That continues to be the biggest challenge that we've had over the past 2 decades, and there's no reason to believe, given the enrollment growth and the planned enrollment growth, that or the planned demand for affordable public higher education that we need to address that fundamental issue. There are also important areas of technology that have to be addressed that we'll be seeking your support in. Those plans are being sort of drafted now for your consideration. And there's also very key important areas of student support services that need to be supported, and including the biggest support service for the instructional side of the house, areas of libraries and research that have in the past, been areas that we have not been able to make investments in. So while we've hired almost 1,500 full-time faculty by the end of this fiscal year, when we all tally it up over a 10-year period, there are other areas we need to make, and we hope to be able to have a package for you in draft form way in advance so you can consider it. But it is, it is going to be a package that you'll be familiar with, because the important issues of this university are not new. We know what they are. They've already been enunciated in the master plans that have been approved by this board and advanced to the governor. So we know what the architecture looks like. We now need to figure out exactly what the ask is and the environment in which we're asking it in, and what those components are. And the timetable is, as I said, we will be consulting with all the constituent groups of the university, and at the November meeting of the Fiscal Affairs Committee, be asking for your approval for a budget request for 2011.
Any questions, comments? Before we start the questions, if I might, this year we have a new student representative or student member on the Committee on Fiscal Affairs. I'd like to introduce Corey Provost. Corey, welcome.
Thank you.
Professor Phil.
I'd like to note the presence of Terry Martell on this committee,
Mike?
new member, and Terry is from Baruch College, from the Weissman School of International Business. Is that
Center
for International Business. He's a long-term member of the Budget Advisory Committee, but that meets with Vice Chancellor Malave, so he's well-versed in the affairs of this committee. I'd like to thank you for your presentation, and in particular for the emphasis on new full-time faculty hiring. That continues to be a major need for this university. And I'd just like to hear if you could comment on the nature of the hiring. There is a memorandum asking for more instructors and lecturers, and we understand the pressures that required that. I assume that's a temporary move, and that we'll be able to go back to hiring full-time professorial rank faculty who will contribute to the scholarship of the university.
That is correct.
It's a large university, and there are many needs. Some of our colleges have great emphasis on teaching, and I suspect that we would have a more differentiated sort of approach. That we did want to make a statement about the teaching side of the house, and with this resource allocation of 200 faculty lines. But at the end of the day, there are hundreds and hundreds of faculty that are hired every year as replacement faculty at this university, and I would suspect that colleges will do what's appropriate for the departments and for the missions that they've been given. And so I would hope that would be the wide spectrum of faculty, including instructors as well as assistant professors and others.
Thank you.
Yes.
Two quick questions. You mentioned an 8% increase in overall FTEs and 12% in the community college. Does that imply a reduction in senior colleges?
No, the community, there's a smaller gain at the senior colleges. The senior colleges are rising at, I believe the number was around roughly 6% in FTEs, if I recall the number correctly.
That's correct.
6%.
And it was 11.8 at the communities and 8.1 overall. And that's in the FTEs. The overall gain in enrollment was 6% in headcount, but the FTE gain was 8.1%.
The second question, you noticed perhaps in this weekend's New York Times an article about Lafayette and their budgeting process and challenges, and the point was made that it's very difficult for colleges to, what's the right word, get rid of programs that already exist. We're pretty good at adding, but we don't do a very good job of looking back and see what perhaps isn't working as it should. I'm new to this committee. Is there a process in place to review and, shall we say, change investments?
Yes, the PMP process, the performance management process that is institutionalized here at this university started in 2002, 2003, a very major component as we set goals and objectives for each of the presidents and their constituencies on their campuses reflects on the culling of programs that are no longer relevant or important or out of date. As I sit with the presidents, I have data with respect to actions taken on behalf of the faculty to rid programs. In general, this is not a cost saving. I mean, the only time you're gonna save money is if you reduce staff associated with programs that even are going to be closed. So it's the right thing to do, and we continue to do it, but it's not really going to have more than a marginal effect on the basic cost structure of a particular college. So I'd underscore that. Let me just pick up on a couple of points that Vice Chancellor Malave made. These increases in enrollment are not sustainable. This is a very large increase that we've experienced in the last couple of years, and we're not unique. If you look across the country, and I speak to people on a regular basis across the country, every public university system is experiencing large enrollment increases, and over the last year and a half to 2 years, that is largely correlated with the economy and the inability of a number of people to maintain their jobs, and others who feel frustrated in their jobs, if they do have jobs, needing to come back and get more skill. And I think in the short run for us, the moral imperative is really to keep this university open to as many people as we can, because there are serious issues that we collectively are facing in society around just sustainability. But this university cannot continue marching in the direction of increased enrollments of this kind of magnitude, because our physical buildings cannot withstand the stresses of those big enrollment increases. It will have the derivative is going to be negative with respect to with respect to keeping as levels of full-time faculty in the classroom. We cannot keep up with hiring full-time faculty, even though we're experiencing these large enrollment increases, and I don't think that's a good idea for the university. I think from an academic and from an educational engagement with students, it's the wrong way to go to start reducing the number of full-time faculty as a percentage of your teaching power, and that's going to be the inevitable consequence here. The third thing is that when a campus is stretched to the degree that some of our campuses are stretched to now, students are going to have difficulty getting advising. Students are going to have difficulty finding appropriate classes to take. There are physical limitations that we are facing, and budgetary implications. So in the short run, it's wonderful to have this increase, the additional revenue we will be able to deploy for further investments, and that is a good thing. But I think from a public policy standpoint, not only this university, but all universities really have to think very carefully about whether we could continue in this way. So, and this is something that I've been discussing with the presidents. Obviously, we discussed this in the Chancellery. I don't believe that we will continue around the United States to see these huge increases, because at some point we're going to have a recovery and jobs are going to be created and people will revert back to the options of work as opposed to no options, and they therefore come to the university. But that's a serious issue that we have to face. We have worked very hard in this university to really bring rigor and accountability and very high standards, and it would be a mistake to revert back by managing a process that will not give the student the kind of experience. We're not there at that point. I believe that we are still we're not at a tipping point, but we can be at a tipping point if we continue moving in that direction. I think it's an important thing. The other thing that I would mention in Ernesto's presentation is, yes, we have a budget problem. The state has a budget problem this year, but states across the United States have very severe budget problems, and they're going to manifest itself more profoundly in the next couple of years as stimulus money are not built into bases of organizations like they are built into our base here, but will disappear at some point in time. And unless there is, New York State, and we have Joe Loda and Mark Shaw here that knows this stuff better than I do, but unless we see sales tax, increases, reverting in a different direction, we're going to be in some trauma in the state of New York over the next few years, and obviously that's going to have an effect on the university. So we need to not only manage our resources as well as Ernesto and others in the administration are doing it, but we need to be mindful that things are going to change. And it may change rather precipitously within 18 months. And we have to be very careful about how we manage our resources. Long answer, but I thought it was important.
I wanted to just go back, if I could, to developments on the city front that I think also address the issue of enrollment and capacity, and that is the work that we've begun at this university that has been endorsed by the mayor with respect to the creation of a new community college. And I think, one, it's a recognition by the city's executive, one, of the tremendous demand for the education that one gets at the community college, and the limited capacity we currently have to meet that demand. And that as we go forward, we need to create new environments to meet this surging demand. So, and I think that was a very encouraging, extremely encouraging, to have the executive of New York endorse the university's approach and their planning. And we're still in the planning efforts. We're a year or two away from creating it, but we're doing all the planning work. But I think it's one of the answers to the question of resources in the future and of meeting the demands that the Chancellor indicated of our limited physical capacity. But and merely not just the commitment to a new community college, but the mayor's commitment to endorse and support those initiatives that have already begun in this administration with respect to the ASAP program, and helping leverage the university's resources and others to focus on the need to redesign some of our programs, to reshape some of our programs, to improve our retention and graduation rates through supporting the ASAP initiative of the university and some others that are being contemplated, moving the university a bit more aggressively and linking with the labor and business community in workforce development activities, and take a look at the expertise of the university in meeting the cities and the public needs. So we're very encouraged by the mayor's initiative in that area. And I'm sure as it unfolds, we'll have more to talk about it, but it's a very encouraging development. Just wanted to add that.
Professor Martell, I thought your question was very appropriate after reading the article in the New York Times. It's what I call a budget conundrum. State and local governments are great at adding programs. They're just not sure how to reduce them. I think this university, under the leadership of the chancellor and his entire chancellery team, recognized that 4 or 5 years ago, and which is why we've seen such really interesting stability for the city university when even the state university had certain problems, because this ongoing program towards finding efficiency in the overall management systems that have been put in place by the chancellor to look at that puts us in great stead as we go into what is going to be a bleak period in our budgets. All right.
Okay.
Report Janet on the investments. It's a separate handout.
Where all the new money is coming from, and the last time I think we reported in June, we were not quite, I think the Dow was at 65 at the time. We're at 95 today, I think. So the Dow is up 3,000 points.
9,500.
9,500. That's right. Let's be clear
It
about
might
it.
feel like 60.
I always got these zeros in my head. So Janet and Barry, if you can report on what I think will be a very good report on the portfolio and what the outlook is, and some of the work that this committee will be dealing with in the months ahead.
First of all, I'd like to say that it's a pleasure to give this investment report because it is a positive one.
Been a while.
And as you know, we've been working very hard over the past year, the investment subcommittee and the staff and management on improving the investment pool, and the new asset allocation was approved. And even though we're still not completely there yet in terms of the implementation, we have made some very important progress to date. While we're still overweighted, as you could see on the first page, in the U.S. equity and the U.S. Bonds, if you turn to page 2, you'll see that since July 31st of 2008, we have decreased the U.S. equity position from 47% to 38%. We've increased the non-U.S. equity from 15.7 to 19.2, and our target there is 20. So we're very close to our target in the international equity area. We've also added 2 new asset classes, emerging markets and real assets. And we've made a slight dent in our fixed income investments in terms of lowering them just a bit. The moves that we've made to date have been fortuitous. I think, I don't want to confuse brains with a bull market, as they say, but the timing of the moves have been excellent, and they've added value. So if you turn to page 3, you'll see that starting at the end of March of 2009 was when we really began to implement the changes. In the U.S. equity area, we terminated 4 active U.S. equity managers and reinvested the proceeds in an S&P 500 index fund. And since inception, that index fund is up 25%. We also hired the same firm, Vanguard, for an international equity index at the end of March, and that portfolio is up 37% since we hired them. In late April this year, we implemented the emerging market asset class by hiring Aberdeen, and since late April, that portfolio is up 40%, and the fund has beaten its index by 380 basis points. And on July 1st, we added the real asset manager, Wellington. And so we have an exposure now to commodities, not only in terms of agriculture, but energy and metals. But there is some degree of real estate in there, although very little, and some climate change investments. That portfolio, since July 1st, is up 5.8% and is also vesting its particular index. So if you turn to page 5 and look at the column on the calendar year-to-date for the first 7 months of 2009, the total pool is up 12.1%. All asset classes have positive returns. And if you compare this to an index portfolio of 65% equities at the Russell 3000, 35% fixed income being the Barclays Ag, we are about 300 basis points above that. It's too soon to use the benchmarks below because we haven't fully implemented the asset allocation. Also, through August, we have some estimates to suggest that we are up another 3.5%, bringing our year-to-date returns to 15.6%. And I don't know, with the fiscal year, I know we had a tough year in the market. We were down 17.2%. However, that ended up being in the top quartile of the Cambridge Endowment universe, and looks to be, according to some recent press on U.S. colleges, about 200 basis points above the average return. So we're making some progress. We still have more to do. We've seen a bounce in the underwater investments, although we still have a few situations there that we're working on. We're hoping that the returns stay with us, and we will be working with the Secretary's office to come up with a schedule of some meetings to address the next steps in our asset allocation implementation.
So you didn't get any calls from Harvard on how you did it better than they did it this year? No.
Yeah, it's really...
They're not going to call, right?
You notice on page 3 we had no investments in, I think it was page 3. No, it's page 2. We had no investments in hedge funds or private equity, which I think answers the Harvard question for the most part. Janet, question for you. If you go to page 3 for a second, if you look at where the assets of where we were at the end of September last year, at almost $138 million, and at the end of July at 132, with a lot of, up considerably over the quarters prior to that. We're not back to where we were a year ago. We're $5 million short, but in the right direction.
We are actually at 138 now at the end of August.
During that period of time, what contributions had been made to these funds that would have been added to the 132, so I can get an idea of, was anything added to the corpus during that period of time? Any particular investments? No. So we've been dealing with the static. These are
Right.
These are numbers that can be looked at.
Right.
That's right.
Fine. Thank you.
It's all performance, no?
This is, and it's all performance-based.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Are there any questions, Professor Martin?
The Wellington inflation hedge, is that primarily a long-only commodity fund?
It's in commodity futures. It's also in commodity equity investments in terms of energy equity securities like ExxonMobil. It's in the soft grains, the soft commodities. It's in in terms of agriculture with Archer Daniels, Midland, firms of that nature. There's a small component in REITs. And also some real estate development firms, but it's roughly about 5%. Most of it, I'd say 80% of it really is in the commodity area, and that would include metals as well, as there are some gold investments in there.
And the benchmark?
The benchmark is one that's been devised by Wellington, but essentially it's inflation plus 5%.
And the correlation is good, high?
Well, we're...
I noticed we're
really
outperforming the benchmark, but I don't,
Right, yeah, I mean, it just started in July, so, we'll see. But I think historically, it's been a pretty good benchmark.
Thank you.
Is there any further questions? No? Any further comments?
No.
Just that the inflows of dollars are not in this pool. they're really in the foundation.
In the foundation.
fund, which is where all of the philanthropy money is directed.
Okay.
We don't have new money coming in here.
There being no further business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor? See you next time.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.